This episode was the perfect episode to follow last week, but they cut it off too soon. Last week, The Acolyte gave us an almost entirely action-packed episode, so it makes sense that this episode slows things down a bit so we can move the story forward. We pick up right where last episode has ended, where the twins have switched places. May is with Soul, and Osha is with Chimere. And we see both of their worldviews start to get challenged as they get presented with new perspectives. Osha waking up at the cave was very reminiscent of things like Phantom of the Opera or even V for Vendetta, where we get a look behind the proverbial mask of the mysterious man in black. And in this case, we get a look behind the literal mask too. It's funny that this episode kind of subverts our expectations by reverting them back to where they were at the beginning of the series. Because going into The Acolyte, the assumption and the implication was that the Acolyte was a former Jedi that's now studying the dark side. But when we start the series, we realize that the former Jedi and the person studying the dark side are two different people. And now, halfway through the season, it seems that we may have switched, with the former Jedi actually now maybe falling to the dark side. And to that end, I feel like this episode was a good first start to Osha's switch. Now, I feel the opposite for May, but I'll get to that in a minute. For Osha, she was already kind of disillusioned with the Jedi. I mean, it was more rooted in her own self-esteem issues because she didn't feel like she was good enough for the Order. So when Chimere started pressing those pressure points, her reactions felt authentic. Now, out of everything I want this show to hurry up and do, this particular thing needs to take time. The care and gentleness and the disposition that Osha exhibits can't just be wiped away. It has to be kind of a gradual descent, and the motivations have to be there. For May, my issues with May and her side of the story are really indicative of my issues with this episode as a whole. Like, it was just too short. This is the first time since starting The Acolyte that I felt like the runtime was actually detrimental to the story. It didn't feel like a cliffhanger. It felt incomplete. After such an action-packed episode, it makes sense to slow things down, but you slow things down so we can get some answers, and we didn't get any. And what's frustrating is that you're not on a network. This isn't ABC. You don't have a time slot, so you can make these episodes as long or as short as the story needs them to be. This episode should have been an hour long. We should have went ahead and got Osha's Dagobah or Ahch-To moment of self-reflection, and we should have gotten May's revelations about what happened with the fire 16 years ago. We've been hearing Soul attempt to confess what happened for at least 3 episodes at this point. I feel like they're dragging the May aspect of this story out so it can keep pace with what's going to happen with Osha. Both characters are inevitably going to have a major switch in their mentality, and I feel like May has a shorter road to go down because she was never really invested in the dark side. It was always a means to an end for her, so her switching her mindset and going into a different direction is not that big of a switch. But Osha going from idolizing the Jedi and having an incredible amount of self-doubt in her own abilities to being a self-confident, possibly Sith, is a longer road to go down and is a bigger shift. So it seems they're trying to stutter May's progression so it can kind of keep pace with Osha's, and so they can have the switch at the same time. But because of that, the whole time we were with Soul and May, this episode feels like a waste of time. And we also checked in with Vanessa and the other Jedi, and they made it to Kofar to see what happened. And this isn't a thing that the Acolyte invented, but this is just another example of the Jedi being too quick to blame their own people, except when it matters. Because the only theory posited of what happened here is that Soul went renegade and killed everybody. So between Soul and Ahsoka, you're guilty until proven innocent, but when a former Jedi orders the assassination of a senator, they can't even be considered a suspect because he was a Jedi. He would never. But one thing that we see now with Vanessa talking to the senator and her behavior this entire series is I think the show is drawing a distinction between a Jedi and the Jedi, because she's the only one that talks about a cover-up. She's the only one that talks about keeping secrets from the High Council and not telling the Senate. She's the only one that's kind of politically minded first. All the other Jedi around her, their first inclination and their first impulse is to follow the rules. Tell the High Council, tell the authorities, report things as necessary, and she is stopping it at almost every turn. And so I think they're drawing a distinction between, the Jedi as a whole are starting to become more bureaucratic because you have people like her in the Order moving this way. But at the same time, it's not systemic at this point. Like, it's really just her. Like, they have rules and procedures, that would go down the right way and alert the proper channels, but she's stopping them because she thinks she knows what's best. So from a runtime perspective, this episode wasn't that short compared to the other episodes, but it just felt like we didn't go far enough, or we didn't complete enough for one episode. At least that's my estimation and how I felt. What did you think about this episode? How have you felt about the Acolyte so far? And what are you thinking or expecting or anticipating for next episode? Let me know what you think, and we can get into it and we can talk about it, and I'll catch you guys next time.